Happy Monday, Memorial Day. I hope you all have had a wonderful long weekend. It's your girl, Natalie, Coach Nat, the Keto Bikini Pro. Just got my upper body pump in. Welcome to those of you joining me live. Hello, Bubbles. Karen is always on, one of my most loyal listeners, watchers, if you will. Tribe members, shout out to Bubbles. Hannah, hello, Hannah from New Zealand. How exciting. We've got a few New Zealanders in our tribe and quite a few Australians and folks from all over the world. So it's exciting to have another New Zealander in our midst. Hello, Michelle. Welcome, welcome. Ladies, if you are on live, drop a comment. Let me know where you are. All right, tonight we are talking about a hot topic that's been on the list for a while, and I'm finally addressing it. Cortisol, the boogeyman. Fear the cortisol. Oh my gosh. Cortisol is the problem. Cortisol is to blame for your fat gain, your belly fat, your inability to make progress in the gym, your lack of muscle mass, your everything. Cortisol is the problem. Or not. Hate to burst your bubble, but as usual, I'm going to be bringing the common sense and maybe some tough love to the conversation about cortisol tonight. So we'll start off defining our terms, as always, talk about what cortisol is, how it actually works in the body, why you don't need to fear it, and why the goal should not always be lowering our cortisol. And I'm going to give you some tips about if you think cortisol could be an issue for you, what to do about that. And then in general, if you do have dysregulated cortisol, if you know that for sure, or if you suspect it, I'll talk about how you can figure that out. But if you do find out for sure that it is a problem, what are some things you can do to address it? Spoiler alert, it's not going to be anything mind-blowing. It's not a secret pill. It's not a magic pill. It's not a secret sauce. And it's not some special program you need to be following. Okay, spoiler alert now. I'm going to tell you about how people are fooling you into buying their programs and their supplements because they're playing to your emotions when they talk about the symptoms you might be experiencing that are related to cortisol dysregulation. So, oh my gosh, you need this special protocol or this special program or this special supplement that you can only get from them to correct this problem and fix your cortisol, and then everything will work just fine. Have you heard that before, right? I'm always talking about being careful about the marketing, because a lot of the things, most of the things that you see out there in the health and fitness space, nutrition space, are riddled with marketing ploys. And I want to save you from that. So we're going to talk common sense. We're going to talk about cortisol, the stress hormone. Hey, Deb is on from California. Hey, love, first live. Oh, I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome, welcome. All right, you're not the only Deb either. You're in good company. We've got some Debs. All righty, let me make sure I have my notes handy here. I've got the questions that popped up in our group. Got some good questions about cortisol in advance from our ladies in the Facebook group. Quick plug for those of you who are not yet in our Facebook tribe. It is amazing. The ladies here in the chat can vouch. Come join us over on Facebook at Keto Bikini Secrets. We have a private Facebook group there, totally free, where I'm in there. Coach Mary Grace, my assistant coach, is in there, and a whole bunch of our ladies who are members of the Academy or are just amazing members of our tribe. Many are graduates of the Academy or those who have worked with me privately before and are walking the walk and talking the talk, and they got the training wheels off like Miss Karen, Miss Bubbles Has Rules, who is applying the things that she has learned with us on her own, and it's been amazing to watch. So there's a lot of things you all can do. Tuning into these masterclasses, jumping into the group without even buying anything, doing coaching with us. That's what we're there for, is to help as many people as we can. So if you're in the Facebook group, I always post about these masterclasses in advance, and I call for questions there. And many of our topics come from that group. So we'd love to have you in there. All right. So a few of the questions we got in the group were, because I asked, okay, what have you heard about cortisol? What do you want to learn about? What do you want me to clear up so you can understand it better? Full disclaimer, I always do this. And the reason why I waited to do this topic for far too long, really should have done this a while back, is because I am not an expert when it comes to hormones. I'm just going to say that because it's in the world of hormones, right? So I don't call myself a hormone expert. And so I'm not a medical professional. I don't get into the science or the medicine when it comes to the things that we're talking about here. I like to talk about the practical things that you all can do in your lives that are going to improve everything when it comes to your health, your body, your fitness, your body composition. That's what I'm an expert on. Body composition, health, life, those things. So I have put this off because I had a desire to like really dive deep into all of that. But as per usual, I just decided to stay in my lane and talk to y'all like I always do. We're going to keep it real, and I'm going to help you think logically and rationally and practically about this subject. And if y'all want me to go on a deeper dive into like all of the science about it, I do have some friends in the space who are practitioners of various sorts who do specialize more in these kinds of things. So I'd be happy to have somebody on and have them talk in more of the weeds about it. But as usual, I just like to knock some sense into those who tend to get caught up in the marketing ploys and wanting to go down rabbit holes that are not serving you. So that's essentially what we're going to talk about here tonight. So let's see. Holly asked, I've always wondered, how do I know if my cortisol is high? It gets blamed, but how do you really know if that's the issue? We will definitely address that tonight. Celeste says, my issue is actually low morning cortisol, which I have been trying to resolve. I would love for you to hit on this side of things, knowing I know high cortisol is the hot topic. Yes, I will absolutely talk about that. I've experienced that myself. In fact, it's really interesting. My most recent blood work, and I've been getting blood work done more regularly because I'm looking more closely at my hormones, and I had some really great improvements in 1 month, but I questioned whether or not I should, whether or not that was an outlier. So now I've been doing blood work once a month for a few months just to see, and it's been kind of all over the place. It's really interesting, actually. It's kind of opening my eyes, and I'm going to be doing a masterclass at some point about blood work because I get asked about it all the time. And this more recent experience that I've been having with doing it more frequently is making me think a little differently about it. So I'm not going to make any conjectures yet about my official stance on it as of right now, but I will be doing it again this month, later this month, or early June. And then I may be forming some opinions because it's been interesting to see how things are fluctuating on my blood work month to month, and it doesn't all make sense to me. So, so fascinating. I'm always telling y'all, tune into your body. We'll talk a lot about that tonight. and don't rely on the numbers so much. And we'll get into that too, because those are some of the problems I see with the assumptions that are being made about cortisol out in the space. Okay. Let's see. Siv said, also, I agree with Celeste. There's so much information on high cortisol versus low. I'd like to know if there is an order of events that occurs in the impact of high, low cortisol. Like, is cortisol the first thing that gets impacted, and then it impacts thyroid, which impacts blood sugar, insulin, and then other hormones? What is the sequence of events? And then to heal, is there a certain order that we need to go in as well? That's a really great question, and I love the way you're thinking about that. And then Stephanie says, oh, there's this popular opinion out there that low-carb, keto, or carnivore diets increase cortisol, and it's bad for you because you're going to have this chronically elevated cortisol on low-carb diets. I will definitely address that. Erin, in her perimenopause journey, said that she started to make connections. She's paying attention to her body, made connections to some of her perimenopause symptoms happening at certain times of the day, did a little research, and she says it seems it's easy to feed cortisol based on various lifestyle decisions. I'm intrigued by the relationship between cortisol and estrogen during this change. So this stage of life. I will touch on that. And then Dana asks, can a blood test result say normal and yet you do still have high cortisol? She said, I have lots of symptoms of high cortisol, but when they tested last year, it fell into their normal range. I was shocked. Yes, we'll talk about that as well. Okay, so let's first lay some groundwork. What is cortisol? Cortisol is a steroid hormone. So when I talk about the world of hormones, and the fact that I didn't talk about this because I don't consider myself a hormone expert, but cortisol is a steroid hormone, for those of you who did not know. It helps regulate stress throughout the body. This is something I want you to remember. It helps regulate stress. So while it is called the stress hormone, because it plays a role in the stress response in the body, it is not something that we need to be afraid of. It is not the boogeyman. It's not bad. It's not a bad hormone or a bad thing that we have in our body. We need it. It's an important part of our stress response, and it helps the body to regulate stress. So during times of stress, our nervous system responds to a perceived threat by activating the fight or flight response, which you may have heard of before. And this activates what's called the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary axis. You may have heard that term being thrown around. You may have heard the term adrenal fatigue, and then you will hear things in the alternative medicine space. They tend to use it. The more naturopathic alternative medicine doctors will generally use the term adrenal fatigue. And then you've got people in the traditional realm saying there's no such thing. They say that because it's not a diagnosable condition. Adrenal fatigue is not recognized by the medical establishment. So there are conditions that are medical diagnoses and that can be tested for, that are, you may have heard of Cushing's or Graves, and what's the other one? I'm forgetting the name now. But those are things that can be diagnosable related to cortisol dysregulation. But it is now being known or being called HPA axis dysregulation. So while it may not be a diagnosable medical condition, if you hear the term adrenal fatigue, consider what they're saying is your HPA axis is dysregulated. So let's talk about what that is, what the HPA axis is. When the hypothalamic pituitary axis, so hypothalamus in your brain, pituitary brain, is activated, and then the A is the adrenals. adrenal system. So that's where our cortisol comes from. When the HPA axis is activated, a hormone called adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, is released, and it signals the adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys, to release cortisol. So cortisol comes from your adrenal glands. Cortisol also helps manage the inflammatory response throughout our bodies. So when we are having anything, any kind of stress, like perceived stress to the body, it could be an injury, it could be an illness, that inflammatory response is incredibly important. So it helps manage the inflammatory response, regulate our metabolism, and support our immune function. So it's important. We need it. We don't want to live without cortisol. We don't want to constantly be trying to blunt our cortisol. So dysregulation of the HPA axis and chronic exposures to high levels of cortisol, in other words, chronic stress, because it's not the cortisol that's causing the problem. Cortisol just doesn't decide it wants to be high for no reason. It's elevated in response to stress. So that's the way I want you to think about it. That's the big takeaway here is, just like we love to say, oh, it's my hormones. My hormones are the problem. That's why I'm gaining fat. That's why this is happening. That's why that is happening. Our hormones just don't decide to just do whatever they want to do. They're responding to what we are doing. They're responding to what we're asking of our bodies. So the big takeaway, and we're going to get into it, is, and we're going to get into like the tips and the things you can actually do to improve this response, regardless of whether your cortisol is high or whether your cortisol is low. And we'll actually talk about what that is as well. How do you know, is it high or low, and what should it be? Because cortisol should not always be high. Cortisol should not always be low. There is a rhythm. So, okay, so it's the dysregulation of the HPA axis, and chronically high levels of cortisol are associated with an increased risk for diabetes, changes in immune function, increased blood pressure, weight gain, cardiovascular disease. And this is why you hear it being the scapegoat, being blamed for belly fat and all of these things. Because, well, what happens when we are chronically stressed? Our cortisol is going to elevate in response to stress. So the stress is the problem. The chronic stress is the problem, not the cortisol itself. So during periods of high stress, changes in the brain can occur, affecting our cognition and our memory, our immune health. Chronic stress can alter the secretion of hormones that play a role in the immune system. This can lead to weakened immune system and susceptibility to infections. So as Siv was asking about this, essentially this cascade of events, what is the order of events, right? Ultimately, what it comes down to is if you are now already in a position where you have insulin resistance, you have dysregulated cortisol, HPA axis dysregulation, and you have a lot of these other conditions, at the end of the day, it does not really matter what came first. The same lifestyle factors that we're going to talk about in a little bit that are going to help you regulate your stress and your cortisol response will also improve all of those other things. So you do not have to heal one thing before you can heal the other, for example. And I know we hear this, oh, this is another topic I could talk about, but in the keto and carnivore space, we always hear, you have to heal first and then you can lose weight. And really what we're talking about is fat loss, right? None of us care to lose weight by cutting off a limb or losing all of our muscle or, losing organs. We want to lose fat, not just weight, right? So, but you always hear, oh, you have to heal first. Once your body heals, then it will effortlessly get rid of the excess body fat. The truth is, losing body fat is also going to help you heal. So you do not have to wait to heal everything before you can lose body fat. You do the same lifestyle factors that help you lose body fat will also help you heal your health when you're thinking about it from the correct perspective and you're not just diving into fads to lose weight by any means, which is essentially my huge platform. That's what I'm always shouting about, right? Let's just not chase these magic pills and these fads when we're doing the right things. And you will hear me sound like a broken record because the things we need to do to heal all of this are the same things I talk about all the time. So, all right. So during, let's see what I talk about last, chronic stress, immune system. All right. So Erin was asking about the relationship with estrogen. So we can see some effects and some interplay. The big thing I want you to understand here is that what is happening during perimenopause and then essentially in menopause, when we no longer have our cycle, during our menstruating years, our ovaries are responsible for producing our sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. During and after, in particular, after we've hit menopause, our ovaries are no longer producing those hormones at the levels that they were before, if at all. Our adrenals take over that job. So when we're talking about adrenal health, which is essentially what we're talking about when we're talking about cortisol, we need to support our adrenal health to be able to support our bodies through the menopause transition and afterwards. If we are living in ways that are creating this dysregulation of the HPA axis and causing a strain and stress on the adrenals, that is where we will cause much worse menopause symptoms. So as Erin alluded to, she noticed these connections. It's the stress connection, right? So she was talking about making adjustments to things like her eating schedule, caffeine, paying attention to the way these things impact her, which is what we're going to get into when we talk about the tips. But this is how it relates to our sex hormones. In particular, when we are losing that production from our ovaries and our adrenals have to take over, if our adrenals have been stressed throughout our 20s and 30s, because most of us lived a very stressful lifestyle as women in our 20s and 30s, we likely already have some dysregulation going into perimenopause. And then that's where a lot of those issues are coming from, those symptoms are coming from. So, and it is because the adrenals have to do that work now. They have to produce those hormones. Let's see. Okay, so. All right, so let's just quickly mention a few of the things that can cause cortisol imbalance. Actually, no, let's step back and say, well, what do we mean when we say cortisol imbalance or cortisol dysregulation or impairment? There is something called the cortisol curve. And you can think about it just like it's very closely connected to circadian rhythm. That was something else Celeste was asking about, circadian health. So circadian rhythm and circadian health are very much connected to adrenal health. We are trying to support our adrenal glands, which are responsible for the body's stress response, the production of cortisol and release of cortisol in times of stress. Really, I want you all to think about managing your cortisol is really supporting your adrenals. That's really what we're talking about here. And we do that through supporting our body's circadian rhythm. And the simple way of understanding circadian rhythm is sun up to sundown. What are we doing when the sun comes up? What are we doing when the sun goes down and afterwards? So when you think about sun up and sundown, I want you to think about the cortisol curve like this. We get a spike in cortisol in the morning. It's what helps wake us up. It's the reason why we wake up. When we do wake up, cortisol spikes. Oh, we're alert because that's what's happening in times of stress. The fight or flight response is, I need to do something right now. I need to either fight or I need to run. So cortisol is a signal. It's saying, hey, we've got to do something. We've got to act right now. It's another reason why we don't want chronically low cortisol levels. It's just as much of a problem as chronically elevated cortisol levels. So in the morning is when our cortisol should be the highest. It's waking us up. It's also why you might see your blood sugar higher in the morning. If you're taking your fasted blood sugar first thing in the morning and you have that cortisol waking response, you may have what we call the, oh my gosh, speaking of perimenopause, here we go. Glucose, somebody remind me. Cortisol waking response, what do we call that? How did I forget that word? Gotta love this stage of life. I know somebody's got me in the comments. Anyways, if you see that dawn phenomenon, thank you, Michelle. I gotta put you up on the screen for that. Big shout out to Michelle. One of those blanks. All right. So the dawn phenomenon, you might see that in the morning with your insulin or your blood glucose. You can't test your insulin at home, but your blood glucose. If that spikes in the morning, it's likely simply the dawn phenomenon from that cortisol waking response. So it's not really anything you need to worry about. You just may want to test your blood sugar again an hour later or 2 hours later. And a lot of people get even better, more accurate measures if they test their blood glucose and their ketones before bed a few hours after eating, because as we'll talk about in a little bit, one of my tips for you is going to be not eating immediately before you get into bed after, especially late night, like after dark. So, okay. Where was I? Imbalances, right, the curve. So in the morning, we want our cortisol high. Then what happens is it slowly comes down throughout the day. So before bed, it should be lowest. And when cortisol drops, that's when melatonin rises, and we get that melatonin, serotonin, calming. It's the time of the night where we're easing into bedtime. So what you may see if you have dysregulation is you might have low cortisol in the morning, you might have high cortisol at night, or anywhere in between. You could have funky things going on with your cortisol. It could be low all day. It could be high all day. So before we dive into what causes this and what you can do about it, you probably already have a hint about what's causing it, but how do you know? How do you know if your blood glucose, if your cortisol is high or low chronically, or if the curve is maybe inverted? That was my problem about 5 years ago in 2020. I could not get to sleep at night. I was up all night. I would go to sleep at like noon, and then I would sleep. No, I would go to sleep at like 4 o'clock in the morning and sleep until noon. It was just a mess. It was completely inverted. Okay, so there's some different tests you can get. You can get blood tests. You can get an AM and a PM serum blood test for cortisol. Now, those can be a little off. You can get false readings from those. So as Dana was asking, can a blood test result say normal and yet your cortisol still be high? Yes, so they are a moment in time on a particular day. Something that's interesting, one of the things I've been thinking about as I've been doing my recent blood work and been getting different readings, is that typically when I do blood work, and probably for many of you, you're doing it fasted. They're telling you not to consume any food or beverage. They do allow you usually to have black coffee if you're not putting anything in the coffee. Coffee can impact your cortisol levels. So, but here's the thing to think about. Whether or not, when you're doing and you're comparing your blood work each time you get it, were you in the same circumstances each time you got it? Most of the time I would get my blood work fasted first thing in the morning, and I would not have had my coffee yet. So one of the times I went, I did have coffee, and then I waited a couple of hours after that to do the blood work because my blood work was scheduled later in the morning. The time after that, I did my blood work. I did my hormone blood work differently on a different day than when I did my lipids and my insulin and my A1C and all of that. So when I just went in for hormones, they told me I didn't have to be fasted. So I wasn't fasted at all. I had coffee and I had my breakfast. And then the last time I did it, I had coffee and I did not eat. Yes, so it's been different in different times. So it's really kind of interesting to me to see how things might shift. And think about it like this too. If you're going in and not having coffee before you have your blood work, but you have coffee every single day of your life, except for the day that you go get your blood work, is that going to tell you what your blood work would look like if you were doing what you normally do? That's one of the it's one of the things I've been thinking about lately with my own blood work, and why I've started having my coffee before I get my blood work, because I do that regularly. So I want to see, there's not going to be a day that I'm not drinking coffee unless some weird thing happens. So I want to go in there the way I normally am living my life and see what my blood work looks like when I'm doing what I normally do. So all that to say, things can impact the blood markers. So what I recommend, the best test I would recommend to get for looking at your cortisol is the saliva 4-point 24-hour saliva test or 12-hour saliva test. You can do, they're going to ask you to spit into a tube 4 times a day at certain times. You're going to do morning, I believe it's like mid-morning, mid-afternoon, and then evening. So you'll be able to see what is your cortisol curve look like. There's also a test you can do, a urine test, and I believe the urine test is a 24-hour, could be wrong. And you can do that through the Dutch test and other kind of urine tests. Those are going to show more of the metabolite, so what is coming out in your urine. And different practitioners swear by different ones, but I would say saliva would be the one that I would go with. I would probably do a blood and then also do a saliva, and you can compare the two. But so you can do an AM and a PM serum cortisol test, and you can do a saliva 4-point test. Whatever testing you're doing, work with a practitioner who knows how to interpret those labs and then can help you understand what the results mean. I generally do my third-party lab testing. Anything that I'm doing outside of insurance that insurance won't cover, usually they don't cover a cortisol test, through Life Extension. And it's not sponsored, I don't have a link for them, but they usually have deals. I think they're doing a 25% off for Memorial Day. They generally have pretty good deals that go throughout the year, and I use them for my hormone testing because that's usually what is not going to be covered by insurance. I got my once a year, and they didn't even cover testosterone. So I wish I would have done that third party, because I probably would have paid a lot less if I went through Life Extension than going through my insurance, and then they ended up billing me just for the testosterone. Grr. Anyways, Life Extension, they're a supplement company, but what they will do is you can do a call with them after you order any of the blood work or any of the testing that they offer, and they do the saliva test. And I will likely be using them the next time I go get another serum blood test, because my cortisol was randomly low last time in the morning, which was interesting. So now I want to dig a little deeper. So that's what you can do to dig a little deeper if you think that cortisol is a problem for you, to actually identify, is it a problem? All right, let's see. All right, so if it is a problem, if we're talking about low morning cortisol, high nighttime cortisol, or any other form of dysregulation throughout the day, what can contribute to this? And then what can you do about it, right? That's the main reason you're probably here. So What causes cortisol imbalance? Well, once again, it's about the stress response. So this stress to our adrenals, right? So anything that can create a chronic stress situation in the body, sleep apnea, and other problems with sleep like insomnia, comorbidities, diabetes, hypertension, Alzheimer's, all of these things, all of the comorbidities, all of the metabolic syndrome, it goes both ways, right? So they can actually create the stress response in your body. Now the cortisol is responding. So that's what I want y'all to think about, is that cortisol is not the root cause of any of your health problems. It's likely that if you have health problems that are diagnosable or preclinical, they are likely the cause of the cortisol dysregulation, not the other way around. And it generally works the same way with hormones. Hormones are downstream. There's a lot of things that are happening in our body that then result in hormone imbalances. And that, I could do a whole topic on that, because we're not going to balance our hormones. Our female hormones are not meant to be balanced. We're not going to have balanced estrogen to progesterone to testosterone all the time. There's a rhythm to that as well. So it's one of those catchphrases that kind of drives me crazy. It's like when people say you want to build lean muscle. Well, muscle tissue is lean. It's just one of those. Anyways, okay, let's see. Okay, so comorbidities, chronic stress in your life. And that's the crux of it, ladies. The real crux of this stuff is that whenever we want to point to something and say it's the problem, particularly when it comes to hormones, when it comes to stress, when it comes to cortisol, it's us. I'm just going to say it. It's us. How are we managing the stress in our lives? Because life is full of stressors. They're around us all the time. We are not going to wake up one day and live in a completely stress-free world. But how can we manage our cortisol levels and our cortisol rhythm and making sure that it is working properly, responding properly? We need to focus on how we manage our way through the stressful events of our lives. How are we responding to the stress? We teach and train our bodies how to respond to stress. Ooh, here's a great little testimonial from Davina. A few weeks ago, I was sleeping so well, asleep by 10 p.m., was up naturally between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. I dropped 5 pounds that week without any other change. I have a history of insomnia / sleep issues. Boom. And then this right here, I respond so much better to stress when I'm very well rested. These two things go hand in hand. And if I had $1 for every client who said, oh my gosh, when I didn't sleep well, then I was craving, then I was reaching for this, then I was eating this, then that caused more cravings, then stress. So here's one that you might not think about in terms of what can cause cortisol imbalance. Lack of exercise. How many of you have heard in the wellness space, don't do intense exercise because it's going to spike your cortisol? That is one of the biggest myths I want to put to bed today. Do not avoid intense exercise for fear of what it will do to your cortisol. I need to write that down so I don't forget. All right. So So let's see. We're going to get into the tips in a second here. So intense exercise is not the problem, much like cortisol is not the problem. Chronic, excessive, intense exercise is the problem. And it's never the people in the situation who are actually over exercising and overdoing the intensity that actually hear the message that they need to stop doing that. It's the people who are not exercising in the first place, or not exercising with the proper intensity, barely doing anything, just walking, or going through the motions with exercise to do the least they possibly can, or skipping workouts or avoiding it, and then hearing, oh, I shouldn't do that because I need to be careful about my cortisol. It's never the people who need the message. It's always the other people. And it's because these things are playing into the thing I always talk about, the limbic brain, that emotional brain that wants to keep us stuck in our poor habits. So we hear something that supports the lifestyle we've been living, and we latch onto that. Hannah just used the same words right there. I think some people just want excuses to not exercise, so they latch on to whatever sounds good, regardless of whether it's true or not. 100%. And those people who are over-exercising and overdoing the intensity all the time, they're only going to listen and want to hear things that support them continuing to do that. And this is one of those things. Oh my gosh, y'all are just right here with me tonight. Davina, this is like the perfect segue. Stressing about cortisol could ironically raise cortisol. 100%. 100%. So these pervasive messages can absolutely make the problem worse. So let's talk about the do's and do nots. Let's dive into these tips here. So the biggest thing, the first thing is never make assumptions. We all know what happens when we make assumptions. But in particular, when it comes to anything that could be medical, anything that could be a diagnosis, anything that you could go and get tested and find out, do not make an assumption based on somebody's marketing who's speaking to your symptoms and saying, cortisol is the problem, or do you experience fatigue? All of a sudden, you're gaining belly fat. You have weight loss resistance. They're using all of these things, right, that play to your emotions. And you're saying, oh my gosh, that's me. I have all those things. I need this program. It's the cortisol. That's the problem. That's what they're doing on purpose. Okay, it's brilliant marketing, but unfortunately, you end up buying into their crap and taking a bunch of supplements that could make your problem much worse. So don't make assumptions based on symptoms. In fact, a lot of the symptoms of high cortisol are the same symptoms you experience with low cortisol, or just a dysregulation that needs to be worked out. So don't make assumptions. If you really want to know and figure out if this could be part of your problem, you can get the testing. However, I'm going to put Davina's comment back up. Another thing I see is an obsession with testing and getting diagnosed with something and being told what the problem is. It's another form of seeking a magic pill. And this is why when we get into the rest of these tips, we're going to talk about the things, because the things that are going to improve your stress response, your cortisol response, your adrenal health, and every other aspect of your health are the exact same things. And if you're taking those basics, if you take those basics and you nail those basics, and then you still do not see improvements, that's when I might look deeper to say, hey, I've got this, I've got that, and I've got the other thing down pat. And I'm still not improving. I'm still going through these things. then it might be time to take a closer look. And then you can work with a professional to perhaps add in some supports. But this brings me to my next do not. Do not ever, ever take supplements to fix something that you have not confirmed as a problem. I also highly recommend against medicating yourself with supplements because you went and got a blood test and it said this, or you went and got a saliva test and it said this, and so you just want to go buy supplements. And as much as I use Life Extension for my labs, I don't go out and buy all their supplements. And if I do get on a call with them to help me understand the tests that I've purchased from them, what I'm not going to do is listen to them tell me, okay, this is what's going on and these are the supplements you need, and here's the bundle or the stack to purchase from us to fix your problem. That is not going to happen. I have purchased some extensive testing from various practitioners and I've gotten on the calls, and then I have made my own decisions from there. Because even then, I'm not necessarily diving into supplement protocols that are going to be incredibly expensive, and you're throwing a lot of different fuel on the fire all at once, so you don't even necessarily know what's helping you. And then there tends to be this placebo effect of, I need all these things, and now I must rely on all these things to keep me healthy or to fix these things, right? So don't make assumptions. Don't take supplements to fix something, especially if you don't even know for sure that it's a problem. You could absolutely be making the problem worse. All right, now let's talk about specifically if you think you have dysregulation of your HPA axis, your adrenal health, your cortisol. Do not avoid, as I mentioned, do not avoid intense exercise for fear that it's going to spike your cortisol. One of the ways that we improve, one of the best ways that we can improve our stress response is by hormetic stressors, healthy, short-term, acute stressors that are strategic. We're putting ourselves into a strategic stress situation, like a high-intensity exercise situation for a short duration of time, to make our bodies better at managing it, adapting. Our bodies are incredible adaptive machines. So you give it something difficult, something stressful to adapt to, and it improves your stress response over time. So if you've been avoiding that intense exercise, stop avoiding it. Start incorporating it strategically. It will make you better at managing stress. Okay, now everything else is also related to what is going to A, reduce chronic stress in your body and life, and B, help you manage through those high stress situations better. That's the key to improving your cortisol rhythm, your stress response in your body. So, diet. Let's talk about diet. And one of the myths you're going to see out there about low carb, keto, carnivore, increasing your cortisol, causing your cortisol to go through the roof. Now you're going to be chronically stressed because you're doing this low carb diet. And that you need carbs to blunt that cortisol response and bring your cortisol back down. Now, in very specific situations, carbs can be implemented in certain ways for certain people, not everyone. So careful if you're latching onto this statement to justify eating a bunch of carbs, especially junk carbs. But in certain situations for certain people, strategically carbs can be implemented, healthy carbs, not junk, to help with the cortisol response. But I'm not going to dive deep into that on this topic because this is a general topic and it's not going to apply to the grand majority of people. So, okay, why might cortisol be associated with keto carnivore diets? Because anytime you make a major change in your diet, and for that matter, anything in your life, it is a stressor to the body. And women in particular are very sensitive to these things, more so than men. This is why you see that men can go on OMAD from standard American diet. They can go straight to carnivore. They get all these incredible results. And we're over here freaking our bodies out because our bodies are more sensitive to stress. So if you go from high carb, standard American diet, all the way to keto overnight or carnivore or any big change, you could go from, and I see this all the time in the keto carnivore space. We're going to do 80-20, all the fat, barely any protein. That's not working. Let me do PSMF. And now we completely flip it. And now we're eating nothing but protein and practically no fat and no carbs. Oh, and then we fall off the wagon. So then we have a binge and we have a ton of carbs. And then we're like, oh no, I binged. I have to fix it. Now I have to go fast. Now we fast for 48 hours. And then we're so stressed out and so hungry and so tired from fasting that we prime. Now we've fallen into the, I'm going to prime. I'm going to do carnivore priming and I'm going to gorge myself on all the meat. Any of these things that we do in the short term that are extreme, from one extreme to another, we are going to cause a lot of stress in the body. So this is what, there's very few long-term, if any, keto carnivore studies out there. So the traditional paradigm is pointing fingers and saying that this is going to cause all this stress and high cortisol. And it's the transition period. Your body needs to transition. You've taught it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years to rely on glucose as its primary fuel source. We have taught our bodies that. Had we lived like cavemen back in the day, our bodies never would have been taught that. But we taught our bodies for decades to go to sugar first, go to glucose first. And now we have to teach them how to essentially live primally again, how to use fat as fuel. That's not a quick process. There's a transition period. So yes, during that transition period, your body's going to see that as a stressor. It doesn't know where to get its energy from. It needs to shift. But once we have adapted, if we see it through and we stop cheating every third day or falling off the wagon all the time, and we actually get our bodies transitioned and adapted to using fat for fuel and creating ketones and using ketones for fuel, it's no longer a stressor to the body. And guess what happens when we put in those high sugar foods? The body sees that as the stress. So that being said, let's continue down this rabbit hole of diet. So what else can we do to improve our body's stress response and to reduce overall chronic stress in our body? Do not consume things that are going to cause extreme inflammation in your body. So the junk food, the processed packaged food, all of those added colorings and crap filler ingredients that your body does not know what to do with because they are man-made, not ever meant to be in the body. They're not nutrients. So when we're putting things in our body that create inflammation, the body is seeing it as pathogenic, dangerous. Alcohol. You want to ask one of the biggest ways that you can stress your adrenals? Drinking alcohol. It negatively impacts your sleep, negatively impacts literally every system of your body. The body's looking at it as a poison. So alcohol, junk food, processed packaged garbage foods. That's the first fastest way to negatively impact literally every system of your body, and especially your adrenals. So, real, whole, nutrient-dense foods. Nutrition, micronutrients. That's number one. So, an anti-inflammatory diet. Enter keto. Healthy fats. Giving the body what the body needs. Protein, fats. If you can handle veggies and fruits, whereas some people are very sensitive, ladies with autoimmune conditions, you might have to be more particular about what you put in your body. This is why people with autoimmune issues of any kind do so well on carnivore. You've identified the things that cause stress in your body and removed them. So that's huge. So your diet. We talked about exercise, but your lifestyle, the biggest thing is activity. For my ladies with low cortisol, I know we had a couple mentioning low cortisol in the morning. And I suspect why mine may have been lower on my last blood work is because, like Davina, I had been in this great stretch of really good sleep. And then all of a sudden, my days got busy. I pushed my last meal later in the night. I was going to bed later. I was having to digest late at night. I was disrupting my circadian rhythm and impacting sleep and then impacting the wakefulness the next morning. And that's how that happens. This dysregulation of our circadian rhythm causes stress on the adrenals and can impact this cortisol rhythm. So the same tips that we give you to improve your sleep are the same tips that are going to improve this circadian rhythm, which is why it's improving your sleep. So seeing the sunlight as early in the morning as possible, waking with the sun, or if you get up before the sun, as soon as the sun comes out, go see the sun in your eyes, outside, not through a window preferably. If you need to do a happy lamp, do a happy lamp. Get that sun in your eyes as early in the day as possible. Move your body early in the day. Be active, even if it's just taking a walk or doing some stretching. But if you're a morning workout person, congratulations. You're doing a lot of good for your circadian rhythm and for your cortisol. Remember, that's when the cortisol should be the highest. So use that energy. Get up, move your body. Okay, moving your body early in the morning. Caffeine can boost cortisol. So, and this was an interesting thing. Don't know why I didn't think about this, but when I was working with my naturopath and my cortisol was low all those years ago in the morning when I had that inverted rhythm, he said, no, don't stop drinking coffee in the morning. We want your cortisol higher in the morning. So if it's not high naturally and the coffee's helping you increase the cortisol in the morning, great. You don't have to cut your coffee. So for those of you with low cortisol in the morning and you have heard you should be waiting to have your coffee and having your food first, those are generally recommendations for people with high cortisol to help lower it. So don't have to skip your stimulants in the morning. What else is going to say about that? Eating early in the day. So not skipping breakfast. Ladies are notorious for this. Intermittent fasting, skipping breakfast, not eating until noon or afternoon, and then having the last meal in the evening. And sometimes that gets later and later. So the best things you can do for your circadian rhythm, eat early in the morning. It doesn't have to be like as soon as you wake up. It could be within 2 hours of waking. At least by 10 a.m. Eat your first breakfast, by your first meal of the day, break your fast by or around 10 a.m. is what I generally recommend. And then finish your last meal by sundown. And that's going to change a little bit with the seasons, right? So when it stays lighter out a little later, you can have that last meal a little later and it won't be as negative an effect to your circadian rhythm as it would having it a little earlier in the day. Or in different seasons. So Think about waking with the sun and then winding down when the sun goes down. Wanting to have that last meal before dark, and then stop snacking at night. Stop the late night snacking and stop staying up late watching Netflix or staring at screens. If you are still doing these things, these are probably the two biggest things that I see impacting my clients and our members, their journey, their results. And it's not the cortisol. The cortisol is downstream because of these lifestyle factors. Staying up late with screens, TV, computer, phone, whatever, and snacking while doing it. If there are two habits that I would tell you to change that will dramatically improve your health, those are the two habits to change. Don't put the chicken before the egg, or the egg before the chicken, whatever. Yes, exactly, Davina. Evolutionarily speaking, it makes more sense to eat more during the day and stop eating when it's dark. It was, she said, I was born 5,000 years too late. Yeah, it makes perfect sense, right? We wouldn't have been eating after dark. That's when we had to be worried about, predators. So, yeah, we need to wind down. Our body wants to wind down when it gets dark, and we don't need the energy. Remember what we eat food for: fuel and recovery. We do not need to be getting a bunch of fuel in our body late at night. We don't need to fuel our sleep. You can also play, here's something you can play with, and this is unique to individuals. I see some people benefiting one way or the other. I tend to like to front load my fats earlier in the day, because fat is the fuel source on the low carb diets, and have the higher protein, lower fat meal in the evening, because I don't need a whole bunch of fat to fuel me at that point in the time, in the day, because I'm winding down. So that's what I like to do. Protein is more for recovery. Fat is for fuel. So I like to go my higher fat meals earlier in the day and then taper them down into the higher protein, lower fat meals in the evening. But you can play with that. Some people, do better in different formats. Protein and fat together in that first meal of the day without carbs is going to be powerful for helping with your satiety throughout the day, keeping cravings at bay, especially after a poor night of sleep. Don't dive into the carbs early in the day. Don't front load your carbs if you are consuming carbs, especially without pairing it with fats and proteins. I talked about this in the carbs masterclass that I did just a few weeks ago, but another component of managing our stress response, our adrenals and our cortisol, is supporting proper blood sugar regulation. So just like our HPA axis can get dysregulated, if we have dysregulated blood sugar, it is going to lead downstream to these other problems. So going back to what Siv was talking about in terms of order of events, here's something you can consider: managing your blood sugar. Put that at the top. This is something we were taught in nutritional therapy. We start with the basics, and then we have the downstream effects. Hormones are downstream, as I was talking about. Blood sugar regulation is at the top. It's one of the first things we can do something about through our eating habits, the foods we're choosing to eat, the combination of foods, the timing of foods. So timing I talked about, combination. If you are consuming carbs in any way, shape, or form, pair them with proteins and fats. So it will help with that blood sugar response, and you're not going to get that spike and drop. Having a lot of blood sugar spikes and drops dysregulates our blood sugar, and that can also lead to dysregulations in our HPA axis. Okay, Michelle says, I have been, she said, just answered, LOL. Adding an avocado to my breakfast of 6 eggs and bacon in the morning. Should I do that since avo has carbs? And then, yes, I did answer that. That's totally fine. Avocado does have carbs, but it has more fats than it has carbs. So they're negligible carbs in terms of a ketogenic lifestyle, especially pairing it with eggs and bacon. You are golden. No worries there. I'm talking more like fruit. You know, if you're a person who consumes berries, starchier veggies, you know, if you do like winter squash, if you do tomatoes. I know my girl Juju is here. She's a tomato queen. You know, I wouldn't wake up and just eat a bunch of tomatoes, right, by themselves. Although I'm like, who would do that? But I don't know. Maybe Juliana would, because I know how she loves her tomatoes. Lately, it's interesting. I've been making my little protein treat with my Egg Life wrap. Little snack tip here. For those who do still have a sweet tooth and want to satisfy it without getting into the crap foods, my personal favorite is, and this is what I use protein powder for, to replace desserts and sweets. I don't use it to replace meals. I don't chug it after a workout, but I just use it to replace desserts. So I will do my coconut yogurt, mix in some protein powder, whatever different flavor of the day is my personal choice, and I'll spread it on a Egg Life sweet cinnamon egg white wrap. And it's, oh, actually, I could show y'all real quick. Let me show you my little snack of choice. This is the next recipe that I am going to share on my socials, because everybody always asks for the recipe and I have not shared it yet. I call it protein frozen yogurt bark. This is the original Egg Life wrap, just the plain egg white wrap. And then this is a double layer. I've got a mocha, which is a mixture of a coffee flavored and chocolate flavored protein powder, with just a couple of grams of cocoa powder, dark cocoa powder. And then I did a second layer of just the yogurt with the vanilla collagen protein. And it is amazing, but it's like a little frozen yogurt bark thing. All right, I'm gonna put it away because it's frozen. It needs to stay frozen. But that replaces my desserts. So I end up with this high protein little treat that's sweet without all the sugar. Why did I bring that up? Oh, sometimes I'll throw in some wild blueberries into my yogurt with some pumpkin seeds. And then I'll mix in a little collagen or some kind of protein in that as well. So even that, if I were going to do that in the morning, it has fat from the coconut. It has fat and protein from the pumpkin seeds and the protein powder. And then the blueberries are with it, but it's a very small amount of wild blueberries. Wild blueberries are also one of the best choices. They're usually less sweet. They have less sugar than the big, agriculturally wildly available everywhere conventional blueberries. They're like really small and they're more bitter. So it's balanced with those other things. So, you don't want to have like a banana by itself. Probably not a lot of us are eating bananas on this lifestyle anyway, but if you were going to have a banana, I would say do like a third of a banana or a quarter or a half, and then mix it with some nut butter, some yogurt, some protein, nuts. Then you're getting all the other fats and proteins in there with it. All right, let's see. What else was I going to say about tips? Screens at night, light in the morning, move your body, move in the morning. Do not avoid strenuous exercise. Diet. No, keto carnivore is not going to cause chronic long-term cortisol, but get through that transition period and do not cheat while you're going through the transition period. Let your body adapt. Once you have fully adapted and you become active and you've started to change your body composition, have more muscle, lose some body fat, improve your health, you will eventually get to a point where if you do want to add your carbs, increase your carbs, you can do so, and you will likely have a higher carb tolerance. But that does not happen overnight. It takes time. Managing blood sugar by managing how and when you're eating your carbs, pairing them, eating your meals during the daylight hours. What else? Screens at night. The biggest thing. And women, unfortunately, we are the worst at this. Neuroticism. There's just this neurotic, we tend to be, I'm saying we, but luckily, I'm so grateful that this is no longer a part of who I am, but this is very much who I was in my 20s. Talk about stressed out to the max. 20s and early 30s. Neurotic, control freak, trying to control everything all the time, the things that I could not control, overly stressing about everything, overthinking everything, overanalyzing everything, sticking my nose in places it didn't belong, and just being way too reactive to everything in life. It's the emotional stress management. That is the thing we need to focus on more than anything else. Okay, those two things I mentioned about snacking at night and staying up late watching screens. But with those things, learning to regulate your nervous system at the drop of a dime. Something stressful happens around you, you can breathe, center yourself, calm your system, and respond rather than react. I wish I could say that's an overnight thing, but it's not. It takes time. It takes work. It takes self-awareness, observation, recognition, and practice. It starts with becoming more aware. How reactive am I? How many things are setting me off all day? Why am I on edge all the time? What can I do to self-regulate? I will mention there's a YouTube channel that I absolutely love called Therapy in a Nutshell. It is one of my favorite mental health channels. Check it out. I'll say it again, Therapy in a Nutshell. If somebody's around their internet right now, I mean, you probably are because you're on here. But if you're somewhere you can type, somebody type that in the chat for everybody else. Therapy in a Nutshell. She is amazing at breaking down all kinds of things related to mental health. She's got videos on everything. I believe she also has some courses that are very affordable, that you can purchase her courses and actually go through her videos in succession. But she also just has all the videos out there if you just want to search for them. But she has a lot of videos out there about self-regulation and regulating your nervous system, how to regulate your nervous system. Really great techniques. So I'm not a therapist. I don't play one on TV, but go check her out to get some tips there for starting to learn to manage that emotional stress response, because that right there is the key, y'all. We can't be up here all the time in fight or flight because we're doing it to ourselves. So you're going to hear, if you were to Google, you know, how do I improve my cortisol response, my stress response, you're going to see, do meditation, do yoga. And like, yes, there are structured ways that you can practice these things. I do recommend learning to meditate. And it does not have to be anything fancy. Everybody always asks, oh, do you have a guided meditation that you like? No. Learning to be with yourself in silence there's no better thing to master in this lifetime than being capable of being with yourself in silence. So I would start there. Block off 5 minutes to start with. I just used my little breathe app on my Apple Watch, and I set it, and it does the little pulses on your wrist, so it can help you with regulating your breathing. And then I just sit in silence. Sometimes I'll have like some meditation music on, and I don't expect anything. There's nothing in particular I need to be figuring out or grappling with or processing through. Maybe there will be, depending on the day, something might come up that I do need to process, some kind of emotion or some kind of experience or thought or stressor or something. But sometimes it's just sitting there and allowing myself to be and observe my surroundings. I love to sit on my balcony in the morning. Speaking of, getting up, taking my coffee, sitting outside, hopefully on a sunny day. I love it when it's sunny. And listening to the birds and just looking out over the balcony and just observing the nature around me. Nature is amazing for regulating our nervous system. Boom, Davina, you are my sister from another mister. I believe that's why we are here, to master ourselves and then inspire others to do the same. Girlfriend, you are speaking my language, 100%. That is what we're here for, to learn, to grow, to evolve, to elevate. This image behind me right here, that's a picture of me in Mexico last year. That is my image to remind me of my word of the year for 2025, and that is elevate to the skies. That's what we are here to do on this earth. We are not staying the same. Evolve, elevate. Oh, yes, indeed. Karen, you are so right. Society has ruined people. Kids today don't know how to do nothing. This is true. Many of us, I didn't know how to do nothing. When I had my big, huge bulimia relapse after 18 years of recovery in 2020, it was when I no longer had anything to do. I lived by myself. I did not have kids. I did not have a husband. I did not have family there because I lived in the city by myself in a 1-bedroom apartment. And I was now all of a sudden plucked out of a life that I had built so much doing that I never sat down. All the way through my 20s and early 30s, mid 30s, my mother was just always telling me to sit down and calm down. And why are you always doing so much, right? How many of you can relate to that? You just pack your life full every day, morning to night. There's nowhere to breathe in your day, let alone get 5 minutes to be with yourself. And then all of a sudden 2020 hit, and I had just left my job to build my coaching career, which had not been built yet. So I didn't have a whole bunch of clients. I didn't have all of the responsibilities of running a business that I have now. All of a sudden, I'm alone in my apartment with nothing to do, nowhere to go, nobody to talk to, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I did not know how to deal with that. And all of a sudden, binging and purging became a huge part of my life. I would just walk around the city for hours, wandering, because I could not freaking sit down and just be with myself. And it had to take a rock bottom moment for me to finally say, hey, wait, I am not my career. I'm not all these titles. I am not all these accolades. Who am I at my core without all those things? And spend time with myself. And it's the best thing I ever did. I'm so grateful for that. So to any of my ladies who may be watching this who are close to or having a rock bottom moment at this stage of your life, I want you to know It doesn't feel like that right now, but this is a great blessing. And you can do amazing things from here. Sometimes we need those rock bottoms because they propel us to the mountaintop. All right, ladies, on that note, that's what I have for you today. Do not obsess over your cortisol levels. Focus on the basics: movement, sleep, stress management, putting nutritious foods in your body. And those are the basics to everything. Nail those down. And if you're still having issues, then you can start getting testing, you can work with practitioners, and you can dive into supports. But focus on the basics first. All right, ladies, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. All the love to you. Thanks for being here with me, to all those who are on live. And for those watching the replay later, if you have questions or comments or experiences you want to share related to this topic, drop them in the comments below, and feel free to request a topic for next week. I've got a few now on deck from our Q&A last week, so I've got some good topics coming up, but I'm always open to more suggestions. So let me know what you need, and I got you. Good night.